as you know, with the Dan Time podcast, if you've been listening, the joke is that it's frequently me talking to other Dans. And I quickly realized that you probably need to branch out because not every Dan is going to agree to come on the show, even though there are uh, many of them in the world. So I thought, how about we make this a big umbrella? Well, shame on me for, I started including Danielle's and Danny's with a Y, Danny's with an I. Uh, there's a Daniela coming up, and I just missed Dana. How did I do it? All it is one additional letter at the end of the name, and we're all part of the same family. But man, I'm slow getting started on this end, but we're getting it going today, and I could not be happier for the first Dana on the Dan Time podcast to be Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's very own Dana Wylie. Thank you so much, Dana. First of all, for tolerating my long-winded intro, but for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great. I love this idea. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, um, I have so enjoyed just really just scratching the surface on your music. Um, but wow, the most recent album, which I really want to put front and center here, and I know there's other projects going on that we'll get to, but How Much Muscle, released in 2023, is folks, if you've never listened to Dana Wylie before, I would jump in at the new album, start there and work your way back. Probably, that's what I did. And and I have so many questions about this record, Dana.
Cool.
First of all, the acclaim that it has garnered. I always like to mention to people that I don't just bring any old Dan or in this case any old Dana on the show. I really want to bring some key players and people that are making a big impact and are excellent at their craft. So
Hmm.
don't take it from me here. The Edmonton Journal um, really put this at the top of their list, and the album was released earlier in 2023. But the Edmonton Journal said this really is going to be on. This will likely be on our best of list, and sure enough, at the end of the year, they included it in kind of a roundup, I guess you would say, for the best records for Edmonton artist of 2023. Um, I guess my first question, Dana, this album is it feels like it's a long time coming. It's a full package, some excellent players. How
Hmm.
proud of how proud of it are you now that you've got a few months and it's been out there?
I am proud of it. I'm still happy with it. It's always a nice treat when you can go back and listen to a record you made some time ago and it still sounds good to you. It's still like the songs still represent how you how you feel and how you see the world, and that this, it still sounds good and it doesn't make you cringe horrifically. That's always a good sign. And this one we actually recorded in the summer of 2020. I had gotten a grant. We're lucky up here in Canada to have some public funding for the arts and for making recording projects in particular. And so we got a grant, and then COVID hit, and so we found a way in the summer of 2020 to make this record. But then the world was all crazy and life was not what it usually is, and so I didn't end up putting it out until just early last year. But I actually made it quite some time ago. It feels like almost like a previous era of my life in some ways. But I was really proud that, and I was happy that despite the situation in COVID, it's a long story how we were able to do it mostly the way we wanted to. But the idea with it was to make a completely live off the floor record, which is not a standard way to make studio albums. But we really wanted to just get the band in a room together and just like lay down these tunes, because as you mentioned, the players on it are all fantastic. And so we weren't, because of COVID oriented situations, we weren't able to do it entirely live off the floor, but it's largely that, just with some sprinklings of overdubs. And I'm really glad to have been able to do that, and I'm proud of that aspect of it for sure, because that's what I love. When an album can capture the kind of live energy that a band has, those are my favorite recordings. So I was really happy to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning to you, and I don't know if this is just a coincidence, but there's such great playing, such a variety. Um, it's such a layered album, and every track, I think, the opening note on each track, it might be the bass guitar, it might be the saxophone, it might be the keys, it might be the vocals. Did you notice that? Um,
I don't know that that was a deliberate choice. No, that's an interesting observation for you to make. That's cool.
yeah, I really liked it, and I, you know, again, I haven't had a lot of time to go back to the prior albums, but I have seen on the other records that you take an interest in other people and maybe putting a message out there that they can grab hold of and run with, maybe in some of their dark times. And
Hmm.
I see how you continue that on this album with like the songs "Cry Out" and "Break, Blow, Burn," specifically speaking to uh, mothers and women who just carry so much on their shoulders. They're often working moms. They're trying to keep it all together. I was thinking about this today. I'm a dad, and men who are involved, good for us, good for them. But, women often get judged more for if they don't look like they're keeping it together. If they want to show up in public not dressed very well, men can just walk around like slobs and still be treated respectfully in some cases, in some places. And women just, it's like nobody, like you say in the song, nobody notices in Break, Blow, Burn until she just finally crumbles, until she finally blows her top, gets angry, and everyone's like, what's her problem? It's like, well, she's taken on a lot over here. And these kids, I mean, I've got three kids, and as a dad, it could put you to the brink of insanity sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's your humor comes out in these songs, and I just like that I can imagine your female listeners saying, "Thank you, thanks, somebody uh, sticking up for me here."
Yeah, I have gotten that response to that song in particular. And yeah, you got it exactly. That's how I tend to introduce that song at shows, is to say that, something that I noticed particularly when I was pregnant with my second child, and when he was really young too, because I have another. um that was something that was really getting to me, the fact that, it's like I'm just working so hard to just barely hold everything together here, and like that's not noticeable at all. It's only when like I start dropping the balls, and like losing it a little bit. It's like
Yeah,
once when you just find that you're like crying in the grocery store out of frustration because like your kid won't stop having a tantrum or whatever. It's like then that's extremely noticeable when you're not holding it together.
right.
And you are, it's not really noticeable at all. And that kind of became a wider metaphor in the song too, that with a certain other themes that I've explored as part of my graduate studies, that we that the earth, being the big metaphor, for the mother of us all, the thing that carries us all, that we tend to look at the earth like it's a kind of a platform, or a canvas on which we make things happen, in a very masculine kind of a way, like this is the surface on which we build stuff. um
Right.
but to look at the earth more like something that is, no, that it's a meshwork of life processes that we are a part of, and that nurtures us all and allows us to do our nurturing, and it's alive. Like that kind of became a wider metaphor in the song.
Um, I love a lot of the lyrics here. Again, with Cry Out, I wrote some of these down. The stars have already heard your cries. Even if someone's not paying attention to you, um, the stars are listening. I think that's just a really sweet message. Holder
Mm,
of words, servant of peace, let yourself cry out because you're justified. You are beautiful. You can fall apart. I don't mind. Um, Men, even, and I've spoken to this on a previous episode, who hasn't been traveling somewhere when you're in your vehicle and you're the only one there? Uh, I can assure you, a lot of men have let some tears fall out when no one's paying attention. And I feel like this song, if someone was driving down the road listening to Cry Out, they could just take you up on that.
Oh, I hope so. You know, I write all my songs to someone. I don't know. That's just a proclivity I have as a writer. My instinct is always to write to somebody. That's what makes me want to write when I want to say something to a particular person. You know, that's what drives me. And that song was very much written for one person, a friend of mine who's, you know, just an amazing one of those people that does hold it all together. You know, she's a registered nurse, a brilliant one, and has 4 kids, and is also a beautiful poet and a songwriter, and I think really prides herself on being, you know, being able to hold difficult things. And you know, she's actually a palliative care nurse, so she, you know, she helps people over the big threshold. And you know, she does it with so much grace. And she was going through a particularly hard period in her life where she wasn't so able to hold it together. She was really struggling with some pretty deep things, and that really bothered her because she really saw herself as someone who helps other people, you know. That's her whole life. And so that was very much to her, and to say, this, you know, this is okay. I see you going through this. It is okay. It's beautiful. It's part of your process. And like, you know, just, you can, you know, just wanting to give her permission to have a hard time, you know, because everybody does.
That's right. Um, with that being said, this album I think really captures you and probably what you like to do in a live setting in front of an audience. It has a very live sound.
Hmm.
You achieve that, and it sounds like people the players that you have around you. Let me mention the names, and if I mispronounce or leave somebody out, let me know. But Daniel Akira Stednicki on drums, Keith Rempel on bass, Brennan Cameron on the keys. You've got the horn section on this album, which is, I think it makes some of these tracks very memorable. Speaking of break, blow, burn, I mean, once you get that dun 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 dun, you know, you get that in your mind. I want to keep going back to that song. It's a really good hook.
Oh, cool.
Um, and so Audrey Ochoa uh, on trombone, saxophonist Dave Babcock, Bob Tildesley on trumpet,
That's right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then produced by Harry Gregg, who, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you do have a side project, kind of a super group from the local area, Secondhand Dream Car, where Harry plays bass.
Yeah. Yeah. We do a lot
Um,
of things together.
but it just sounds like you're having a really good time with these players. It's a real, it's some tracks, real bouncy feel, real lively, uh, flavorful. I had this word. I don't even know if I was driving, so I couldn't kind of check myself. But it's just a some of these songs are really delectable.
Oh, that's
Uh,
nice. Thanks.
they're just very. It's a very rich medley of these different instruments coming together. Did you know, um, like going back to the previous record, "The Earth That You're Made Of"? Did you think at that time about experimenting with the horn section, or was it? How did it come together
Yeah.
to, hey, let's
Actually,
do it on this album?
Earth That You're Made Of did have a three-piece horn section on a few songs, and it was the same players.
Yeah.
It was Dave and Bob and Audrey. Dave and Bob and Audrey are like the go-to horn section. I mean, they all have reputations far beyond Edmonton. Audrey actually toured for a year with the. She did the U.S. national tour of Hadestown for, you know, even though she also teaches at a Catholic school. You know, when she took a year off from teaching at a Catholic school to go and do the U.S. national tour of Hadestown. Like she's you know, they all have, you know, huge reputations and are just so good. And so for, I can't remember the reason that with Earth That You're Made Of, which I made in 2016, I can't remember why it seemed apt in that album to have horns on a few things. I had never done that before, but we did, and I, you know, I got enough funding to be able to do it. And so um that was such a good experience. And I think when getting that band together to perform those songs from Earth That You're Made Of in a live context, that kind of became my band. I was like, well, why would you, if you can do it like this, why would you not, And so very much How Much Muscle, even though, thematically it goes to a different place than Earth That You're Made Of, and sonically in many ways too, it very much came out of that, that band was formed quite organically from what, how things went with that previous album. And now that feels like my band.
Yeah, and your vocals, I haven't even spoken about your vocals yet, but folks, if you listen to any of these tracks, it's going to jump out at you that this is a seasoned musician. It just has a natural gift, but you do a lot with your vocal range, and some songwriters with your talent may not introduce all these other players into the mix, and I think it's great that your vocals are strong enough, but you still invite these other layers into the songs.
Well, that's the joy of it for me, like there's nothing I like better than, playing with other musicians, either live or on record too. Like I love being delighted by what other people bring to it, whether that's just like a little lick that just makes you go, "Oh, that was so tasty," or whether it's like a whole, like a real, if a band member brings a real creative contribution to a song that takes it in a direction that I couldn't have anticipated, that's what it's all about. When I do get other players to play my record, it's never about, this is my vision and this is how we want the song to be, and just play this part and make make my vision come alive. It's all, it's like I want, the people that I'm lucky enough to work with have so much to quote unquote say as artists and as musicians, and that's what brings me joy, and that's what makes, particularly my last two records, that's what makes them what they are, particularly maybe my rhythm section, Dan and Keith. There's another Dan. um, they what they bring to the songs, as instrumentalists, it becomes like a key part of what makes the songs what they are, like the creative contribution is immense.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think music fans maybe have a tendency to think that if the album cover on every record says Dana Wylie, that Dana is kind of the driving force, and like you said, she's saying, "Okay, I want you to play this bass line. I want you to play this guitar solo that I wrote," and maybe people assume that, and there are some um, high profile musicians from major bands that kind of jump off and do a solo record. And I'm sure that does go on in those cases, but I love what you said there, that you're there to collaborate, and everyone is welcome to bring something to the table.
Yeah, that's just how I like to, that's what brings me joy, like I said.
Like, do you ever hear a drum roll and you say, "Hey, wait a second, that's great. Let's do not so much do that again, but that's fantastic. I want to keep that in the song."
Oh yeah, and I mean that's a collaborative process too. That's something that I might point out, or that Harry, the producer, might point out, and or we might disagree, and then we have some nice, fun, healthy arguments about, you know, which which because every take is going to come out a little bit differently because everyone's just in the moment. It's like it's always a subjective thing which one is stronger, and that's a healthy part of the process too, which is also part of what makes it fun for me.
Well, one more track that I love on the record, it's the penultimate song, Reconcile. It just the back half of it is just rolls into something beautiful. As your vocal line is trailing off, Reconcile, the horn section grabs the relay, and it's wonderful, folks. Download the whole album, but I mean, maybe jump ahead to that track. And do you have a particular song on the album? And I want to get your thoughts on Reconcile too, but is there one that you like the most personally?
um yeah, that's a tricky question, but I'll say about Reconcile that I actually didn't write that one. My friend who I was just talking about, who I wrote Cry Out for, she wrote that song.
Oh,
um
okay.
And I was really happy that she was okay with me bringing it to life for this album, because she's, I said, like, she's a nurse by trade. She hasn't done any recording, at least so far. She doesn't make music professionally, but I just thought that was such a beautiful and profound song, um, that so she allowed me to just kind of take it, and we took it in quite a different direction than her original, how she would do it, and which was fun. And I believe Dave Babcock was the one who came up with the horn arrangement for that one, and it works so well. He pointed out to me later that it's like a classic, like Herb Alpert kind of a horn line, which you wouldn't think would be appropriate for that song. And I was like, that's so true, and yet somehow it works. And yeah, I really feel like it makes that track in so many ways. It's so great.
And then the album closes with just I called it sparkling cover of the Shirelles, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? This
Mm,
is jumping outside the box a little bit, maybe. Is that a song that you've loved for a long time? How
yeah.
did that come
Yeah,
to
it's a
be?
song
Or
that I've like if I think back to when I was a kid, like my first realizations that music was a really exciting thing for me, it was hearing that song. And there's a kind of geeky musical reason for that I can explain now. At the time when I was a kid, it was just like, oh, there's something so exciting about how that song works. Like there's this sparkly thing that happens in it, and which I now have the knowledge to describe as, like, it's where there's a major three chord that goes to the six minor chord, which is not it's a fairly standard move, but it's a great move. And it just, like, when I was 8 years old, like, it really fired me up, and I've always loved that song. And more than 10 years ago, I, for whatever reason, I don't remember, I came up with my own cover of it, just on my, messing around on the acoustic guitar. And having lived with that cover for 10 years or so, I just thought, I think just get it down on this record. 10 years seems like a long time to sit with one song. And yet I found that now that I've been doing this for long enough, it actually, it's after you've been doing a song, whether it's a cover song, or like I do some traditional folk songs as well, a song that you didn't write, to get it in you. Like, it's really after about 10 years that you really feel like, okay, this is really in me now, and I have interwoven with it to an extent that it's its own thing. My version of it is its own thing, and so yeah, I just wanted to put it on the record, and thought Audrey would write a beautiful horn arrangement for that too, and she did.
well, before we get too much further ahead, I probably should jump way back to when all this started, when your career as a singer-songwriter began, kind of in an unconventional way, or maybe you wouldn't have seen it going in this direction, but a few events happened. So I guess 20 or so years ago, early 2000s, you were um, well, born in Saskatchewan, and then you moved to Edmonton to attend theater school at McEwen. Is
Hmm.
that right? And
Yep.
and then maybe being out with some theater friends who also performed, you kind of saw some of your friends playing on stage and thought, wait a second, I can do that. I want to do that. Um, and it kind of got that itch, or it scratched that itch, or whatever, brought those feelings to the surface, and you decided to make a play for it. Were you already maybe filling out notebooks with poetry or lyrics or things like that at that point?
No, not really. It's an interesting thing. Like, I I never, like, I always felt like I was a music person first before I was a theater person. When I went to study theater, it was, as a musical theater person, because I always thought I was a singer first. And I didn't have a lot of opportunity as a kid to do drama, because I grew up in a small town where that kind of stuff just didn't exist. So I was always a singer, and I always loved, like, old standards and, American songbook stuff. But I didn't my experience growing up in my small town in Saskatchewan was, that, like, I didn't ever experience anyone having a band, or like playing rock music or pop music or folk music. It was, I took piano lessons, and all of the experiences I had of people actually making music were always in these very kind of institutionalized kinds of ways. I took piano, and I would compete in festivals and take exams and do, go through the grades in piano. Until I was had moved to Edmonton, I never experienced anyone like just having a band, or even getting to go out to live shows and see bands play. So it was just wasn't, the idea of kind of writing songs in the kind of folk or rock, realm, whatever that is. It just kind of wasn't in my world. And so it was a kind of very strange and revelatory experience to go, and like, as you said, you've really done some deep research here. Like I did, I went to a cafe where two of my fellow theater students were playing, because they wrote some folky songs and played guitar, and I watched them playing their songs, and I just thought, I know I can do that, and I have to do that. And it had never occurred to me before. Like, so, but then it just, like, it wouldn't let me go. And it was so hard. Like, it was such an arduous process. First of all, learning to play piano when I didn't have music in front of me, because that was the only way I had learned how to do it. But then also just writing. I didn't know how to write songs. It was probably took me 8 or 9 months to write my first song. And it was my memory of it now is that it was so painful and like not comfortable, and like, but it was just like, I have to do this. Like, I got to figure this out, because this is somehow important. This is like who I am, like, it was very surprising, and it totally changed the direction of my life, because then I was like, okay, I don't think I'm actually gonna pursue a life, trying to get jobs in theater. I think I want to be a musician. And then as I met more musicians too in around Edmonton, starting to go out and try to play open stages with my songs, then I sort of realized too that, oh, I think musicians, as I got to know some, it's like, these are actually my people, my tribe, more than actors who are very different from musicians in lots of ways. So,
Yeah, I should probably give credit. I was doing a little bit of research. Curious Arts, and this is an article from 2014, but please visit
oh,
curiousarts.ca. That covers the arts and music and theater scene, I believe. I hope I'm not misspeaking, in Edmonton.
I think that's some University of Alberta publication that, like, of the Faculty of Arts at the university. I think that's,
Okay.
yeah.
So within a couple years, and I'm not, I'll ask you, how the opportunity presented itself to move to Taiwan and continue this exploration. Um, this would have been around maybe '05 or so. Um, Take me through that period of time.
Yeah. It's so funny, because when you like look back on your life, you know, from, I, then now, looking back on like the last 20 or 25 years, is it's like it always makes some kind of, this is my experience anyway, it like makes cohesive sense. It's like, oh, I had to do this because then that was what enabled this, and it all kind of comes together like a story that leads up to a certain point. But at the time that I moved to Taiwan, that was like just the most baffling thing I could have done, like, and I didn't know why exactly. And it was one of those things where everyone in my life was telling me that it was the worst idea ever, because I had just self-produced a one-person show at Edmonton's Fringe Festival, which is actually the world's second biggest fringe festival. It's a big thing we have here. And I had, produced and performed this one-person show that had gone pretty well, and it seemed like, as someone in my early 20s, that I was probably planting some good seeds to have a good career in theater. And I was going around to open stages and playing, but I don't know, it was just like, my boyfriend at the time had taught English in Taiwan previously, and obviously was living back in Edmonton. And I don't know, he kind of wanted to go back, and I just had this feeling like, I got to get out of here. I don't know, I don't know what it was. And the prospect of going to Taiwan, that was just the possibility that was there. But I didn't have any feelings like, I should go to this place. I didn't know anything about it. And I had some trepidation about it, because I didn't know, first of all, I didn't know if I wanted to spend loads of time teaching English, which was what you do over there as a foreigner. And but I knew I wanted to save some money, and I wanted to have time to just practice and write. And but the thought of going to Asia was scary. I had never been there before. I thought, how am I going to do anything? I don't speak the language, and so but I don't know. It had to happen somehow. And as it turned out, that particular place, Taiwan, was just like the perfect place to be as someone who had just decided, okay, music is the thing I want to focus on. So because I needed to play, I needed to get better at playing, and I needed to have time to write. And Taiwan is a place where, first of all, there's a thriving expat scene of artistic people, because at least the time that I was there 20 years ago, you everything that you could do there as a white person, essentially, it usually in the English instructional market in some capacity, everything paid really well. And so I knew a lot of people who had been living in Taiwan for years and worked 10 to 15 hours a week and made enough money to survive, and therefore had lots of time to do the art they wanted to do, and so filmmakers and musicians and writers, and so going there, it's like I right away had the opportunity to play in all kinds of bands, and play all kinds of different kinds of music, where, like, the bar wasn't that high, and so there was room for me to just kind of not be that good but still have an opportunity to do it. And so I was getting better, and I had time to write. And um yeah, so there were just all these aspects of Taiwan as a particular place to go that made it, the perfect place to be. And it just happens to be a wonderful country too, that I still have such, fondness and a real deep love and respect for. It's just a great place.
Yeah. And then within a couple of years, you moved to England, and that's when your first you form your first band, first group of musicians. And as I understand it, you just begin this almost frenetic writing, recording, touring cycle.
Mm.
It, is it kind of a blur looking back at those years, those first three records, which I'll mention here? Almost There is the debut, um, December of '06,
Mhm.
and then the Unruly Ones, kind of every couple years, and then Something's Going to Happen Here. Yeah, when you look back at that time period, is I look back at my early to mid 20s. There's some fun, some mistakes, and it's kind of a blur. But
Yeah, yeah, in many ways it is a blur. And also just so formative. They don't really tell you that like really through your 20s, you're not really a grown, figured out person yet. You're just like, as you say, you're just going around having lots of adventures and getting into scrapes and getting yourself out of them and making lots of mistakes. And it's, those are, I don't think of my formative years, in terms of who I feel I am now and am still becoming, like, as I think of that as my 20s, not my teenage years or my childhood. And so and again, being in England, the reason I ended up there was because I had met an Englishman in Taiwan, and we had gotten together and moved to England together. So it wasn't a place that I ever thought I would go to, but there were particularities about that place too that were key to the way in which that was a formative period for me. But and yeah, with the band, yeah, we were just, I had saved up some money in Taiwan, and so we were able to just focus on our music. And neither of us had day jobs, and so it was a real grassroots operation. We were just, and this was 2005 as well, so it was pre-social media. Facebook didn't exist yet. MySpace was like this new thing that it was like you got to be on MySpace, but it was still new. And so we were just like looking up pubs all around, the Midlands in England, which is where we lived, and just saying, hey, we have our own PA system. Would you hire us on a Saturday to come? Like, how much will you pay us to come and set up in the corner and play a few sets? And like that's how we did it. We were just on the phone all the time, and driving around and playing as much as we could, and then yeah, eventually making records. And yeah, it is kind of a blur. And it all just kind of went and went and went, until it fell apart. and then and then it fell apart, as things do,
Yeah, you again in that time period for a lot of people, you're throwing darts, you're trying things out. You don't know yet, like you know now, that you're not really uh well, I don't want to say you're not old enough to um you think you're more experienced than you are when you're 23 or 25, or if you kind of realize that you're not, you still try to swim with the current. I don't know. And but wow,
yeah.
I mean, you created um some wonderful music. Um and the time period is kind of um is crystallized, I guess you'd say. I mean, for good or for bad. I
Yeah,
mean, I understand it wasn't all great memories that group of musicians and what you had going on there didn't maybe end that well, but the music remains and um uh how
yeah,
it,
I'm happy for
oh, go
that.
ahead.
I am happy for that. I feel like I don't know that this is true for all artists, but those first albums that I made with the band in England, we made two of them over here actually, but it was all that band. The musically, they're so it's so different from what I'm doing now. Like it really is an archive of like that's where we were at, and because those were independent records, it's like we had no one who was more professional or more like representing the industry or like labels and things like that, making us sound more polished, and like it's what we were at that time. And so that whole back catalog, it really does exist as an archive, and like which is an interesting thing to consider. I'm so happy for that, and yet also if I think about the fact that like I don't want to listen to those records, and if I think about anybody else listening to them, it kind of makes me cringe because I'm like, oh god, like oh the musicianship is so raw. My singing voice sounds so young. What the way I was writing it just totally betrays what a young clueless person I was, but it's like, but I'm also glad for that, that's real. It's like an archive,
I, I think one thing that remains, because I listened to a few tracks on the early records, but your humor, a lot of tongue in cheek references. It's just it's painted all over those songs, and I love that. You're not afraid to jump out there and just um, write something, sing something that another artist might say, I don't know if I want to make that statement. I mean, there's well, I won't bring up any of the old lyrics, but you do. I think you're endearing to your listeners, people that have followed you for a long time. I'm sure they do love the humor in some of the songs because it is a welcome relief. You don't want to listen to. Uh, uh, it's great if there's uplifting messages and like what we were talking about at the top of the episode. But sometimes you need a little bit of a snicker in some of these topics.
Yeah, yeah, that was always strong for me back, particularly back in those days. And I came from theater and music. I was really immersed in musical theater for a good few years there. And it's funny, it's not my favorite stuff. I don't it's totally out of my realm of experience right now, but at the time, like I came out of that. And so in terms of like approach to lyrics and approaches to song forms too, like that's the world that was my knowledge base. And musical theater writing is a bit more like that. It's more specific, and it's the lyrics in it are meant to kind of grab your attention, in a way where it may be more like folk or something like that. It's meant to be more like generally evocative, and like it doesn't it's not necessarily a good thing to have lyrics that are like really grabbing you in a idiosyncratic way, but yeah, I guess that's what I'd say if I was gonna assess myself as an artist and as a songwriter, as a young person from this vantage point. I'd say that was my strength. Like I I think I was quite bold in that way. I was kind of not afraid to to yeah do make put out songs that were kind of weird and quirky and funny, you know, in ways that, like, you know, the music industry, even the folk music industry, is not gonna like legitimize probably, and didn't, you know. And there, you know, there are other assessments I can make of aspects where like I had a lot to learn, and but I'd say that that's what I had going for me back in those days. I was for some reason kind of unafraid to just kind of throw stuff to the wall like that, you know. And that was part of the environment too, the people I had around me, and you know, being in England was part of that too, part of what enabled that, I think.
Well, by 2010, you're back in Edmonton, and it's kind of a period where you're thinking, what should I do now? Which way do I want to turn? What makes sense? And I think um, it seems like you wanted to continue to hone your craft, but really get an understanding. You had maybe always had an interest in music theory, and just going back to school for this sort of thing to continue your career. So you apply at the University of Alberta, and then several years later earn your BA Music Honors degree. Um,
Yeah.
do, I mean, I can't imagine. I can imagine you continuing to write and record, but just we probably don't get the new album How Much Muscle in its same inception without this period of your background. Um,
Yeah.
how how proud of you are? How I always do this. I trip over words every other sentence. I'm glad you guys still faithfully listen to the show, but anyway, how proud are you of that experience and what it's done for your career?
Um, Gosh, that's a sort of a hard question to answer. I think going to university at that time was kind of one of those things that I can make sense of in hindsight, but like truly in that moment, um, the thing that motivated me to enroll in university was like sheer panic and like not knowing what to do, because like everything that I had been like just working, like the thing that had become my whole world was like had fallen apart. And like looking back now, like I was in a right state, like I was not in a good place, you know. um but and for whatever reason, and well, for I think for a variety of reasons that I, you know, that I could probably try to make sense of, I the way I responded to that total existential crisis was to go to university. And part of the appeal of that was just the structure. It's like I knew I needed something that was going to tell me just where I needed to go every day and what I needed to do, you know. Like that was that. And it felt like a luxury to be there. To be doing an undergraduate degree in your early 30s is actually a beautiful thing. Like I might argue it's the best time to go, you know. You're so grateful to be there. You're never just like, oh, I, you know, like, oh, is it going to be on the exam? Do I have to, how much do I have, the bare minimum I have to learn, you know? It's like you're just like, wow, all I have to do is learn all day. This is, wow, how lucky am I? You know, like, so it really wasn't, I mean, I guess I did at the time see it as a kind of part of a master plan, but at the time what I thought that master plan was that I was like, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to, you know, even though I'm just starting my undergraduate degree, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to get a PhD, and I'm going to be a music academic, because like, because if I can drop one F bomb, like, because like fuck the music industry, and like I can't hack this. So I'm going to be an academic. That's my, you know, that's the thing I'm now clinging to, you know. And so you know, and so but I also I loved being in school. It was such a privilege and like a luxury in so many ways. And so yeah, I got my undergrad degree and then went into the master's program, but really, you know, never stopped playing at that time. Even made another album that you may not have even found like at that time, because it's not really out there. That, or maybe you did, I don't know. You did a deep dive,
Um,
but that
I
one kind
saw.
of fell away a little bit, but it did get made while I was in school. And but by the time I was you know, almost all the way through my master's program, I had realized by that point, it's like, no, I really don't want to be an academic. Like, first of all, I had discovered that academia is at least as much a racket as the music industry is. Like it truly is. And I just like after about 6 years of being in university and also having had one child at that point, and I didn't have the second one yet, but I was like, I gotta play, like I gotta get back to playing. And so for various reasons I dropped out of my master's program. I'm now back in it, just finishing up the first draft of my thesis just to get the thesis done. I'm not I don't plan to participate in academia, but I just want to put a cap on this project. So yeah, it was like, as I look at it now, it's like it was a university was like a very, very valuable and wonderful place to be at a time in my life where I just needed something to hold me, just like stop me from
Right.
just, like dissolving into, thin air, because like everything was just, life as I had envisioned it was like clearly not happening, like I think, everyone has these points in their life where it's just like you had a plan and you were just like throwing everything at that plan, and then it just somehow it doesn't become sustainable, or it doesn't pan out, and it just like it makes you feel like you are gonna just like go swirling into the heart of the sun or something, it just feels really big. I don't know how to, you know
Yeah, you just feel like you're wandering and adrift, and maybe you just, like you said, wanted to plug in some structure
yep,
and say, okay, I got to fill out my days a little bit more,
yep.
get them a little
Like,
more
what to do.
organized. I need to go to bed at a certain time. Maybe that would be good for me. Maybe I need to be told that I need to be somewhere at this time.
Yeah, yeah. I remember a transitional period that was kind of funny. For my first semester of university, I remember doing most of my homework in bars, like drinking pints, because like that was the environment I was used to being in. And it was like it would have been too much of a culture shock to just go straight to like sitting in the library all day. So I would go to the bar and like get a pint and like do my reading or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, by 2017, the the Earth That You're Made Of record, you're finally getting some recognition. People are starting to pay attention. And this record earns you a nomination for Contemporary Singer of the Year uh, with the Canadian Folk Music Awards. That must
Yeah.
have been a big moment just to finally say, all right, I've got this body of work here, and I'm proud of this new release, and I'm actually getting up to the top of the heap here after all these years.
Yeah, I mean, it did feel like that. I mean, it's funny. Things like awards like that are, it's to when you do get a nomination for an award or something like that, it's a wonderful thing, and you feel grateful for it, and it serves a purpose. But it's like looking back, it's like those are never the things that are like that can make you feel like just proud of the merit of the work, because there's so many factors that go into who gets nominated for awards versus who doesn't, that have to do with how you're playing the game, and not necessarily the merit, but that that was definitely part of it. There was just the general kind of environment at the time and how I was feeling. It was really making that record where I felt for the first time like I feel confident that like I do what I do well, and that that the when you're younger, it's like we I was I dedicated my whole life through my 20s to music making and making all these records and stuff, but really there was like this huge part of me the whole time just feeling like like I'm a total imposter. It's like this is a classic thing, imposter syndrome. But it's like I think it was when I made Earth That You're Made Of where I really felt like, no, I think I feel confident that I know how to do this, and that I do it well. And so that did feel like a turning point in that way. And yeah, getting that award nomination was super cool. Like that was very cool, and you know, a rare thing for me.
Dana, my favorite track on The Earth That You're Made Of is Sliver of a Moon.
Oh,
I meant to ask on the new record, or I'm always curious how many of these songs survive into the next touring cycle. Do you perform that one much, or do you like that song?
Sliver of a Moon?
Uh,
Yeah,
uh, that
that's an
sounds like I shouldn't
interesting that you
ask you
asked
if
that,
you like
because
your own song.
no, but no, it's interesting that you would ask that about that particular song, because no, I do like it very much, and I almost never play it. for it's yeah, it's I have a few songs like that that I really, that people respond to well in on the albums and things like that, but that just don't always feel um appropriate to bring out in certain concert contexts for whatever reason. And often that's just because I'm playing in places where, I mean, less and less over time, but like I've spent a lot of my life playing in places where, you might be competing for attention with, you might be playing in a bar or something where like the hockey game's on, and like you're,
Right. Okay. Yep.
so when I do that song live, I'll pull it out in a context where I'm playing at a festival or in a soft seat theater or something like that. But but also it's something that that song in particular, the horns and the, oh no, that one doesn't have horns on it. It has a string section. The string quartet on that
Hmm.
um, is like such a big part of what it is that um yeah, it's interesting that you would have that thought because I don't play it live that much. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that song and a few others, I think you had this quality about your singing style, your delivery. It it feels like it would be appropriate even decades ago. If you go way back to the maybe the kind of early mid part of the 20th century, this is like just a throwback, very
Oh,
welcoming sound. I think it's just you don't hear that delivery, that message. I mean, the sliver of a moon. I'm just imagining how uh, the lyrics came to you if you're wandering around one night and observing the moon, and it's just I that one uh, particularly had an impact with me.
oh, thank you. It's funny, I hadn't thought about it as being kind of, a throwback to the earlier mid 20th century in that way. But that, I mean, music from that time, it is very, it's very present for me and it's beloved to me. So that's interesting.
Now, I may have to jump forward and then jump back again, but let's talk real quick about, man, Dana, you have a lot on your plate, and
Yeah.
I was thinking about that today. Do you like to keep a full plate, um, and just have some activity in several different areas if you can? I'm kind of cut of that cloth
Mm.
where people, I can relax. I like to relax, but not for very long. Um,
Yeah, I would say we're the same in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the Leonard and Joni, the untold love story, you're actually um, back in the theater realm and taking this performance on the road in Alberta. I wanted to
Yeah.
highlight this is a part of your current schedule.
Yeah, that wasn't something I initiated actually. There were two the guys producing that show, one of whom wrote it. They approached me to back last spring when they were just got the idea and were wanting to write it. They wanted me to do the Joni bits, so I talked them into hiring my band for it, um, which they did, and we did it at a venue here in October, and now we're going on the road. So yeah, that's an interesting opportunity to, it's not exactly theater, but it's definitely storytelling. So, that skill set definitely comes into play in a really wonderful way. And I definitely had a period of my life where I was way too immersed in Joni Mitchell and had to kind of like emerge from that cocoon at some point. But she I know her story and I know her catalog well. And I mean, Leonard Cohen is um, so fantastic too. So it couldn't, even though I didn't initiate this project, I feel so lucky to that someone is doing it and that I'm a part of it. It's brilliant.
And so Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell had a brief love affair in what the mid late 60s.
It was 67. It was, yeah, which interestingly is before he really got famous. I mean, he's sort of funny. It's like he kind of had the height of his fame when he was in his 80s, or late 70s, but it was before either of them really got famous and before Joni had even released an album. But they were both on the early stage of things. And I mean, the story is that Judy Collins had decided to produce both of their songs for an album that she made. She put Both Sides Now on it, and she also did Suzanne, which the Leonard Cohen song. And this was around the same time period that she had been introduced to the work of these songwriters. And she, I guess, as a gesture of gratitude for them having, given her these songs to that she, I think, had big hits with. She arranged for them both to be invited to perform at the Newport Folk Festival in '67, even though they were both pretty unknown. And that's where they met. And then they just hit it off. And I think they were together for the better part of a year. And then, life goes on, and their lives changed, quite dramatically from around that point too. So yeah, it's an interesting little, often unknown piece of their histories.
And speaking of Joni Mitchell as an influence to you, um, some more press, some more acclaim coming your way from Penguin Eggs magazine once called Dana Wylie you're the only artist that they are comfortable comparing favorably to Joni Mitchell in the scope of her talent ever. So that's some high praise.
That was the thrilling one for me to read for sure. That was, I can see, I mean, it's, Joni Mitchell's acclaim as an artist is pretty universal. So it's generally speaking, it's high praise. But, for me personally, to having, I feel like I have a complicated relationship with her music, but a deep one. So yeah, that's one of the most thrilling things anyone's ever said to me or written about me for sure.
And then also I haven't heard any of these songs, but I'd love to. The release date is September of this year. And we mentioned, I think at the top of the episode, Secondhand Dream Car,
Mhm.
the Edmonton area supergroup. You've been doing a residency at a local club there,
Yep.
and the album Answer the Call is planned for later this year. This seems like you're having a lot of fun with this. And what's the response when you guys are out there? I'm sure people that are part of the scene all kind of get together, and then naturally you just, well, hey, what if we did this? What if you want to come up and jam, or do you want to? I guess it just comes together if you've been around a while and you make friends. Do you have a lot of fun just getting up there and playing with people that you've known for a while?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's very special. I mean, you mentioned earlier that this was a side project, but I almost feel now like my thing has become a side project, and I'm pretty focused on Secondhand Dream Car right now because it is one of those things that just sort of came from being around. Uh, Three of us in the band actually were just asked to come together to form a house band for something called a pro jam, which was happening at a different venue actually. Which was a kind of meant to be a thing where like kind of like a jam night, but for professional musicians, and they wanted to have a house band that played at the beginning of the night. And so I was asked to be the keyboard player and singer in that band, and my good friend Harry, who also has produced my last three records, he was asked to be the bass player. So obviously we had history. And the person actually putting that band together is the drummer Jamie Cooper, who I had never played with before, although like we knew each other socially. And so, and we had another guitar player playing with us named Enoch, who had, he has his own project, so he hasn't ended up in this band. But yeah, we started playing together once a week, learning a few cover tunes to do this gig basically. And after about 6 months of that, we were just really starting to feel like, wow, we're vibing pretty nice together. This is starting to feel like it's something. And 2 years on from that, we are very much a band. We brought some other people into it, and yeah, we've recorded an album, and we're playing every week. To have a residency as a new band and play every week is just the most valuable thing. And it's it's very exciting. It's different. It's kind of like soul roots, blues, rock music. It's quite different from what I do, but it's like music that's so close to my heart. And yeah, when a band comes together where it's really just working, and it's so clearly that like greater than the sum of its parts kind of a thing, it's like that's a special thing to be nurtured. And and you know, and to just be grateful for, you know.
Well, I can't wait to hear the music, and I'm excited without even having heard it that you're shifting your focus in this direction. Because if I feel like I've heard the best of Dana Wylie on How Much Muscle, I can't wait for what's coming
Oh yeah,
next. And
I
I
think
kind
you're
of
gonna
wish
love the album. Yeah, I'm excited for you.
I wish I was a little bit closer to the area. Um, but you never say never. I like to travel, so hopefully one day. Speaking of Edmonton, um, for some people, my listeners who have never visited that area, how vibrant is the local music scene, the art scene, and if they just want to go take a trip there?
Hmm.
Um,
That's a great question. Edmonton has a really particular and rich cultural history. Um, I'd say that, you know, the music scene right now, like we're, I'd like there to be more going on. And with us starting up this residency, playing every week, we have a strong intention to, we want to move the whole scene in the direction of where Edmonton can be the kind of town where any night of the week, if you want to go hear great music, like you can do that somewhere. You know, you can go hear a great band because we have so much, there's so many great local musicians. And that we're trying to kind of push the culture in that direction because it really did once have that. And thanks to, I don't know, whatever the cultural environment was in through the 60s and 70s, it it allowed for, so I mean the Edmonton Fringe Festival, which is a theater festival, was founded in 1980, which is the same year as the folk festival here. And this was all started by, you know, grassroots. These were totally grassroots operations. And you know, Edmonton has always had that. Um, and I felt that when I moved here in the late 90s, nearly 20 years on from, you know, these things, you know, this part of the cultural legacy. I felt that, like I felt it immediately when I moved here. I was like, this is a place where people just make stuff. They don't wait for, like, you know, someone in Toronto to like notice them and give them a pile of money, like, or whatever it is. People just make stuff, and you know, and they find a way to make it work whether they have money or not. And that's why I fell in love with the city. And that's why, having left the country for several years, when I came back, it was like there was no question for me where I would move back to when I came back to Canada. Because that is, so that's what I feel is special about Edmonton. And it had, you know, it has to do with all kinds of like economic factors, like where Edmonton has fit in the, you know, the larger economy of Alberta and Canada, that it's been, you know, it's never been quite as moneyed as Calgary, because all, you know, here in Alberta it's oil and gas country. And you know, all the oil companies, they have their offices in Calgary, and Edmonton has traditionally been a bit more blue collar. It's the capital city, so we have the provincial legislature here. So this, you know, this matrix of all kinds of factors that have meant that, like, what has grown through the latter part of the 20th century and into this one is like a real grassroots cultural scene, which is in theater and music and you know, other artistic pursuits as well. And I so our thing with our band is that we feel like, for various reasons, that's been lost a little bit. Like, you know, the Fringe Festival now is still, it's still a wonderful thing, but it's huge now, and it's, you know, it's a lot more corporate than it used to be. And you know, like everything moves in that, you know, the Edmonton Folk Festival now is also huge. um you know, like they sell 25,000 tickets, and they hire two local acts every year. They hire dozens and dozens of acts, the vast majority of which are not from Edmonton, you know. So it's like, um
the
we
bigger it
really,
gets.
yeah, exactly, you know, that's how things go, I guess. But we really feel like, and I've always felt very strongly like Edmonton has this, and I can appreciate that as someone who moved here at some point, who didn't, you know, grow up here and take it for granted. It's like, it really blew my mind when I first moved here at the age of 17, particularly in contrast to where I was from, you know, a small prairie town that just didn't have, you know, everything kind of revolved around, you know, hockey, really, you know. Um, with our band, like we hope to be a part of moving our scene in the direction of, I think, back in the direction of what it always has been, like back to its heart as a really vibrant grassroots, you know, and proud to be what it is, you know.
I was reading about the Ravenwood Festival,
Mm.
and I guess you played that last year.
Yes. Oh no, I played a few years ago. I think it was 2018. But I they have a music club. They're doing a
Oh,
whole
that's
season
right.
of it now, and I did that just last week.
But I love this quote that you said about live music. Um, live settings, live settings are where music lives. It's so important, not only to the local music community, but to the there I go again, but to the community in general. I love how you say that because a vibrant music community just kind of spills out into the rest of the community, and
Yeah.
it music includes people. It welcomes people. You don't have to. You can usually show up to a music venue wearing what you want to wear, being who you want to be. You can come with a pack of people. You can walk in by yourself. Music is is welcoming. So I just love how you say that.
Yeah, that's so true. That's well said.
Um, and wow, we could keep going and going. We'll probably have to cut it a little bit short, but I also want to speak to the duets album that you've got scheduled with Sammy Volkov.
Mhm.
That's I have no idea what that's about. I mean, other than
And it's just another thing, you know, you gotta have a lot of things on your like you said.
um, but I wanted to put that out there. Everybody listening, also check out Makings of a Voice. That was you may have to fill in the gaps for me on this one too, because that's where my notes stopped. But I think it's a uh,
Yeah, that's kind of a theater storytelling piece that I have done a few times over the last well, since 2021, I guess. I wrote it through 2019, 2020, and then in 2021 I performed it, and then I did it at our Fringe Festival actually just this past summer. And you know how and why I decided I wanted to write what it is it's a storytelling piece that's extremely personal and autobiographical, and interweaves my songs with the storytelling. So it's not exactly a play, but it's not a concert, and I don't know quite what it is, but and I couldn't tell you now why I felt at some point a few years ago like this was a thing I really needed to do, but I did. And so I don't know when I'll perform it again, but you know, it addresses all kinds of things about, you know, being an artist and being a mother, and you know, the complications of maternal lineages and things like that. So yeah.
now that you mentioned motherhood, I forgot to really dedicate time to this topic. We'll try to do it real quickly. How has being a mother, um, this is such the different ways to ask this question, but as a creative person, um, young kids, they can kind of get in the way or kind of disrupt just everyday tasks around the house that can drive you nuts. But when you've got an idea and you want to be working on something, but well, I also have a 2-year-old, so I need to shelve this for a while. Do you go through stuff like that? I mean, we love our children. I'm not trying to paint a different picture, but how has motherhood and your craft uh, blended? Do they coexist? Do you include the kids?
Yeah, I think they really do coexist. And I mean, I prefer them to. It's not nice when life starts to feel super compartmentalized, you know, although it does inevitably. There is a real contrast between, you know, for example, last night was the night I do the residency with Secondhand Dream Car. So I was out at a blues bar playing from 8 to midnight, and then I get home late and I get to bed late, and you know, then I got to get up in the morning, and it's this whole daytime. It's like in in some ways the contrasts are very real, you know, but they weave together. And my kids will, I teach music lessons in my house too. That's part of how I make my living. And sometimes my son is playing in the living room while I'm teaching a piano lesson, because that's how it has to be. And sometimes my kids come to gigs with me. And I went back to England last summer for about 2 weeks, to do some shows with my old bandmates. And my 10-year-old came with me, and that was her first big trip away from Canada. And it was, it was all kinds of things. It was challenging to bring her, and it was also fantastic. And in the end, like, for her to have had that experience felt afterwards like the main reason to have done it. So for me, it's like integration is always what you want. You want life to just feel like it's one thing. And it's funny because yeah, inevitably having kids makes it really hard to be a creative person and a musician in particular. Like I think it is true, I don't have stats to back this up, but I think it is true that the vast majority of women making music full time and participating in the industry don't have kids. I think that it's certainly my observation, because it's not easy. What music as an industry asks of you is kind of total. But on the other hand, it's like I can't conceive of being able to be creative and do all this stuff with like having kids was just so essentially grounding for me in a way that I don't even want to think about the person I would be right now if I didn't have kids. It's like it because I mean, this because you have kids. It's so grounding. Like, it's at some basic level you have to function like a grown up when you have kids, like, even if that's just at a real basic level.
Right. Yeah, you have to make concessions, and um but I think you have a unique opportunity, as do any musicians, artists, performers. You've got children. Children are naturally, they want to look up to their parents. Um, you know, Kids still, unfortunately, who have fathers who just disappear and never send them a birthday card, and just, they just go away. Um, Kids still long for that parent. They could be just the worst at that job, at being being a parent, whether it's something that bad or you're just on your phone all day and not playing with your kid. Your kid still idolizes you. And I try to check into this myself, that many, many years from now, when we're gone, just like we do with our parents, we're going to tell stories. We'll be in our kids will be in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, and they'll be talking about, oh yeah, this is how my mom was, this is how my dad was. And
Mm,
you you're kind of getting a chance to craft that story now. Um,
mm.
so I think some parents don't check into that as often as maybe they could. I don't want to preach to anybody, but yeah, they look up to you, whatever you do, whether you're uh, an electrician or a musician or a lawyer. They uh, they look up to you, and they will talk about you when you're long and gone. I mean, when you're
Yep,
long
that
gone.
that's so true. And I always feel like there's a balance to be struck. I mean, I guess all parents, and maybe mothers in particular, must feel like this, but I certainly feel like so much of like who I am as a person is like I don't think of as being very mom-like in a way. And in many ways, like, this is something that I address in my show, Makings of a Voice, that I was raised by a mom who in many ways was not very mom-like. It's like one of the one of the lines that people remember from my show, which is a thing I actually said to someone in real life one day. A guy, like, this was before I had kids, and I was actually in Taiwan, and I was at a bar, and the I was talking to this guy, and I don't know how the topic came up, but he asked me if I thought I would have kids one day. And like the thing that just came out of my mouth without even thinking was, no, I don't think so. Cause like I was raised by a long line of women who shouldn't have had kids in the first place. Like, like that, like that, my mom and my grandma, my baba on my mom's side, in so many ways, like these are women who like in so many ways like weren't that well suited to being a mother. And like I feel that about myself too. Like my life, and what my kids see me do, the shape of my life, the kind of the lack of routine and regularity in it. When kids really do need routine and rhythm, and it's like my life does not have that. And like there are all these ways that I feel like, oh, this is not, you know, um this is not normal. And like maybe it's not ideal, but then I also think, but it's like I also like me, living my life in a way that's increasingly authentic to me and to them, and just like following, whatever that is that we follow in our lives, learning the lessons we need to learn. It's like that that my kids are part of that, and they're and as you say, they're observing me do that. And like there's no scenario where it would be the right choice for me to decide, a good mom is like this and is around and doesn't work and doesn't go out and play gigs until 2 in the morning, and so I'm going to do this. It's like that wouldn't make me a better mother, because I, the it's like the kind of classic maternal self-sacrifice. It's like it's inevitable, but if you carry it too far, it's I think it would be a detriment.
Sure. Well, I like what you said about just authenticity. We parents often don't have a lot of control over our schedules of what we're called on, and different different things pulling us in different directions. And there's times where I'm taking my baby daughter to her caregiver in the morning, and I'm walking from the car down the sidewalk to that front door, and I'm realizing, wow, this is about the only time that I'm going to get to hold her until the end of the day. But then when we all come home, it's going to be the boys and my baby girl Vivian. I'm not going to get to just hold her exclusively. So this is like just a fleeting moment,
Yeah.
and that dawns on me. But I just think, well, just trying to make the most of this time, be authentic, and
Yeah.
um,
And yeah, for me it's like just trying to be present, like because you're not always there, as you say, but it's like um that's the thing that I do continue to challenge myself to do, is just when I am with them to just be present, even when I don't want to be, when I'm just like tired and I just want to be like whatever, laying around or reading a book, or like and but to just like be with them when I am with them. It's it sounds like it should be easy, but it's not always. But it's like that's the thing I feel I have to keep working to get better at.
well, wow, I feel like we could explore this topic
Yeah, that's the whole
maybe
other thing.
for another episode. I always mention a second episode, so this time next year or whenever, I would love to reconnect with you and talk about your current projects.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would love to do that. That would be so great.
This has been fantastic. I usually try to pepper in a little lightning round of stuff, of just some silly questions, maybe one or two if you've got
Yeah,
interest in something
sure.
like that.
Fun.
Um, how do you, are you a breakfast person? I am a huge breakfast person, where it's like, feed me everything that I could possibly eat. And I don't have time to do all that. But if I did, I would do the pancakes, the bacon, the eggs, the everything. Well, probably not every day. It's not very healthy. But are you the type of person when you wake up that you want to eat a big breakfast, or are you okay with just some coffee and let's get this thing going?
Well, yeah, I love a big breakfast, but I want it about 3 hours after I get up. I want to like I want to get up because I'm a nighttime person really naturally. So like I want to get up in the morning and just have coffee, and ideally sit around like and not I really struggle with the whole like the whole get up in the morning and like got to get the kids lunch ready and like make a million things happen right away. It's like that's hard for me. I would just like get up and like sit around with a cup of coffee for a while. And then like, yeah, once I've been up for a couple hours, then yeah, yeah, bacon and eggs and the whole bit. Yeah, I love love that.
Um, when you don't have a gig and you don't have to be anywhere or do anything, what are you most inclined to do? And there's no wrong answer. Do you like to watch a documentary? Do you like to, are there series that you like to watch or movies? Or do you want to just open a book? Or do you ever just want to, sometimes I'll look at park benches at times and I'll think, wow, it's been a long time since I've just seen somebody or been there myself just sitting
Mm.
and looking at my surroundings and not looking at my phone, not being occupied with anything else, just sitting, maybe eating something, maybe not. But that's a bizarre twist on that question. But what what do
Yeah,
you
this
like to do?
um gosh, I don't watch things that often. Mostly I find that I don't have time. Maybe the downtime you're talking about just doesn't happen that often.
Yeah,
But I do I mean I do like to read too, but probably don't do it as much as I would like to because yeah, like yeah, I feel my plate, like as you say, I've filled up my plate quite a lot. So there's just like usually if I reach the end of a task and it's like close to the end of the day, it's probably not good how often, even if it's like 11 or 11:30 at night, I'll, in that window between that time and going to bed, I'll find some other little thing that I need to get done, like so that's
that's
hard. But
me.
I really like going for walks. And I've gotten better at identifying, you know, more often moments where it's like, okay, like I need to go, as you say, like just not tackle anything, not take in any information, and just go be out and like look at stuff. And we have a pretty extensive river valley here in Edmonton, with a lot of green space, and it's quite forested. And so to go be able to walk in the valley and just it smells different than the rest of the city, and that for me is really valuable because for me, like watching documentaries or reading books, it's like I don't know, it's just how I work. Like that's not even really downtime for me because I engage intensively with those things. So
No,
yeah.
but there is like you said, wherever you live, there's something outdoors that you can go explore, even for 30 minutes, and
Mm.
uh, that sensory engagement when you just go for a walk, it's more than just, oh, it's a sunny day. It's you start noticing things, you start smelling things that you're not expecting, and um,
Yeah, it gets you outside of yourself, I think. That's a big part of it and a big benefit to it.
and I guess one final question. Let's say all the way back to 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, did you have a career that you envisioned that was different from what you're doing now, or wasn't even theater, or was it always something in performing arts, or hey, I like to sing and something's going on here.
Yeah, that was it. I didn't have a strong vision. I didn't have careers in music modeled for me that in my life, but so in a general sense, it's like it's a strange thing. It's like I knew I was a singer before I knew how to sing, like I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, that's
And
it.
like you said, when you were a child, there wasn't you didn't see a path, and even as you're becoming a teenager, it's not like, oh, well, I'll just go form a band because it didn't seem like that's what people. Um,
Yeah, it wasn't modeled. Yeah.
mhm. Well, great.
We'll
I've
figure
so
it out.
enjoyed this. I've just thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. I hope you have as well.
I definitely have so much. Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for participating in the show. This is the Dan Time podcast, folks, but I probably don't say it enough. It may appear just that something like this is about me. And if it's not, it's just a quirky way for me to present people who are named Dan or pretty close to it. Uh, why? I'm still trying to answer that question, but hey, look what we've created here. It's fun. I'm really trying to encourage people, like I said at the very beginning, to get outside your bubble, but also demonstrating through what I'm doing here that you can find a common thread with other people, and it might just be the letters in your name. Um, but thanks for being here, Dana,
My
and
pleasure.
I wish you all the success here in the new year and with your projects going on. Real quick, I'll mention it in the show notes, but danawyle.net is the website. DANAWYLIE.net. Any other plugs that you like to put in for people?
Um, well, my band has a website too, secondhanddreamcar.com. So I guess, people can check that out too.
Okay, and so just I sometimes pump out all the other social channels, but really, if you go to these websites, you'll get to the other places that you want to go, and you can find out the performance schedule um, on either end. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dana, and we'll reconnect hopefully later this year. Remember, folks, if you're going through something right now, which everybody is, you've got people who are rooting for you to succeed, to get through it, to let it all out, and they don't even know you. And that's people like Dana Wylie. So make sure you download or you can purchase an LP version of her latest solo record, How Much Muscle. I cannot emphasize enough. Please take a shot on this album and be on the lookout for new music from Secondhand Dream Car. You guys have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next Sunday on the Dan Time Podcast. Thanks so much, Dana.
Oh, that was so much fun.
Okay, so I'll hang on a second here.